This episode brought to you by
GTM AI Academy. Learn AI from a globally trusted resource, Coach K, Jonathan Carford. Their bundle, Enablement AI Mastery, includes both the core Generative AI Foundations course and Enablement AI Mastery specifically. Each course has a value of $599 individually, but Coach K is offering them as a bundle with reduced pricing. And as a listener of the Inside Sales Enablement podcast, if you act now, you can use code ISE3 to get an additional 30% off of the entire thing. You will also receive free access to the GTM AI Tools demo library. Coach K has done the demos, so you don't have to, and offers his straight shooting opinion, fact-based through an enablement lens. Go to www.gtmaiacademy.com and enter code ISE30 today and elevate your AI enablement game.
Hello and welcome to ISE Season 3, Enablement History, broadcasting from OSC, the Orchestrate property.
Welcome to the Inside Sales Enablement Podcast. Where has the profession been? Where is it now? And where is it heading? What does it mean to you, your company, other functions, the market? Find out here. The Inside Sales Enablement Podcast starts now.
Hello and welcome to Inside Sales Enablement Season 3, Enablement History. And today I'm so very pleased and blessed and grateful to have RES. Yes, RES. More on that in a minute if you haven't heard the news. President Paul Butterfield in the studio here, fresh back from a hop across the pond to Birmingham in the UK. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside Sales Enablement Season 3, which is focused on sales enablement history. And it's awesome today to have a historic figure in the room, the RES, yes, our Revenue Enablement Society. More on that in a minute. President Paul Butterfield in the studio, fresh back from a hop across the pond to Birmingham in the UK at the National Sales Conference in the United Kingdom, where he was representing the Revenue Enablement Society. Speaking of going global, they have just gone global. Hopefully I'm not stealing any of your thunder here, Paul, but the new URL is resociety, not .com, not .org, .global, to truly encompass the fact that the Revenue Enablement Society is a global organization. So he's been putting his sky miles to good use and proving it. So jot it down and check out resociety.global. But let's turn to Paul himself. He is the CEO of the Revenue Flywheel Group. He's also holds advisory board and business partner positions for multiple additional logos, including Saleshood and Coach CRM. He was previously the VP of Global Revenue Enablement at Instructure, as well as the head of Global Sales Enablement at Vonage, did a lot of time right here in Atlanta, I believe, Paul, and Sales Enablement Director for GE's Commercial Center of Excellence. Mm-hmm. So that said, Paul, you've spent a lot of time reporting, it sounds like, to the C-suite. Tell me a little bit more. Did I miss any gaps? Welcome to the show. Would love to hear your side of your story.
Oh, great. And thank you, Eric. I've been looking forward to this. Always have a good time when we have conversations. No, that pretty well nails it down. I've been very fortunate in the way that I came into enablement. And I can share a little bit of that if you'd like. But the bottom line is, from the very beginning, I reported to either CRO or at Vonage, it was the SVP of Global Operations at a $2 billion company. And every time, my boss reported to the CEO. So It wasn't directly into the C-suite, but we had that visibility, we had that urgency and that thought presence with them as to what we were doing, what we were working on. And that has made all the difference. And I'm grateful that I never, even at GE, much larger organization, my boss was only one step from Jeff Immelt, the chairman of GE.
Wow.
So again, our initiative had, so very grateful for that because it really does matter.
And that sets the bar in the right spot. That's a struggle that a lot of folks in our audience have had, is having the gravitas to get the attention of that executive level, not to mention to be in a position where you are a degree or two of separation from the top ears of the company that can take actions. And in fact, that's a great place to head down the path. When did you first hear the words sales enablement, Paul, and what did they mean to you?
To clarify, I don't know how much gravitas I had at the beginning. Fake it till you make it.
You got it now, brother.
Yeah.
Global president of the society. I'd say that pulls a little late.
Yeah. My kids call it president of the world. That's them, not me, but they were excited.
King of the world.
The first time I heard the phrase or the term sales enablement was in my boss's office at a company called InContact, SaaS contact center software.
Okay.
And went in there as a sales leader in mid-September of 2012, thinking that we were going to talk deals to go and commits and all that 2 weeks before the end of the quarter, right? No, he goes over to his whiteboard and he writes sales enablement. And then he goes on to explain or remind me really that his mandate from the board, he'd only joined 3 months before, was to take us from 225 million to 500 million as fast as he could. And there was no sales training. Frankly, there was no L&D for any employee at the company at that time. And he had heard of this sales enablement and he'd studied it. And he decided that he had to have that to achieve his goals from the board. So I'm sitting there in my mind, I'm like, what's sales enablement? I'd been around the sales world and tech sales specifically for a lot of years by then. And I'd never heard of it. So I nodded and smiled, but I ran back to my office and Googled it as soon as I could. But that is when I first heard it. And then he proceeded to outline how he viewed enablement and what his objectives were. And he sent me home as a Friday. He sent me home with the challenge on the weekend to think about whether I'd accept his offer, although it wasn't really, right? Wink, wink. And then to come back Monday with it. And come back Monday with an answer. And if it was yes, he wanted some high level 30, 60, 90 bullets. And so I was doing a lot of studying about sales enablement that weekend.
So what ballpark year were we in there? And what
September 2012
were you deal with?
Right near the end of Q3 in 2012.
2012. Okay.
Yep.
And so what did you uncover about sales enablement in 2012?
Not much. I found Scott Santucci's work. I'm pretty sure he was still at Forrester then, but either way, he had published work on the internet. There was some stuff from Gartner. There was some stuff. We had a sales executive committee. We had a subscription to that. So I was able to find some stuff there. But bottom line, there wasn't a lot. And I had no idea how to find, much less talk to other people doing enablement. So I read what I could. And I, again, was grateful. It was an incredible opportunity, Eric, to work in a laboratory environment almost, where the executive in charge of all revenue said, here's what I want you to do. You go figure out how to do it. So my first meeting after telling him yes was with all the other sales VPs and directors that they were my peers, right? I'd been there a little while already. Right. And we got together in my office and a big whiteboard, and some were on the phone, and we just brainstormed, said, look, this is what Bill wants. I get to go do it however we think is the right way to do it. And we mapped out a rep's journey. We mapped out the skills they would need for each stage of the sales process. And then we identified the gaps. Right? That was an incredible session. And if you think about that, my birth into enablement was coming purely from the viewpoint of those of us responsible for generating that company's revenue. And given the latitude by a boss to make mistakes, which we did. I did. I can't put that on them. I got their input. That was on me. But also to stumble on some things, which interestingly we'll get into, aligned with years later the founding principles or positions. But that was it. That was my beginning. The other key to that success was the fact that when my boss announced Bill Robinson, thank you, Bill, also an Atlanta connection. Bill is a bulldog through and through. When he announced me to everyone, he said, never mind the title change. He is still a sales VP in my organization and will be involved as such in all the same meetings. And y'all need to listen to what he says.
And so the folks in the room where it happened, you said they were all connected to driving revenue. Were they all
Yeah,
peer sales, or were there some cross-functional folks?
at that point, no cross-functional, unless you call BDR, the BDR director, cross-functional,
But you put them in the
the way
marketing.
we were organized, they weren't. They reported to Bill as well.
Got it.
No, that came later at that same company, and we can talk about that. But no, that meeting was like I said, up until 3 days before, my peers in the sales leadership organization. And we were like kids in a playground. We're like, all right, we can build whatever we want. We can't complain anymore because now we've got the license and the budget to go make stuff happen for our teams.
So we're in 2012-ish there. The Sales Enablement Society was founded in 2016.
Yep.
At what point did you intersect as in the present president of the Global Society? Where did you cross paths with it, Paul?
Jill Rowley.
Oh, great. Jill, of course.
Yeah. I don't remember how long it was after the Palm Beach meeting, but it was pretty soon that she sent me a thing on LinkedIn. I think it was LinkedIn. And she said, hey, look at this. And I think this is something that you'd be interested in. And here's how to join. And I remember I was really excited because badges are cool. I'll admit it. And I guess I was in the early enough tier of people that weren't in Palm Beach that signed up that I was listed as a founding member. So it was pretty early.
What better story than Jill Rowley, who is one of the 100-ish Fore-founders, who is the social selling queen, using LinkedIn to reach out to you, and you receiving a badge. Like, it's like you were knighted into the queendom. I love it.
Jill and I crossed paths when I was at GE. In fact, we had dinner in San Francisco. We had dinner out in the Bay Area somewhere. I can't remember where now. And I remember she had just picked up her Model S recently and was like, I got to ride in it. It was pretty cool.
Early adopter of that of every technology, I think. So when did you first did you go to a physical meeting like that? Did you start a new chapter, or what's our next step in the history?
Right. I followed any way that I could online.
Okay.
And let's see, 2016, I was getting ready to start at Vonage. And so I got heads down building at Vonage, trying to figure all that out. I've never inherited an enablement program, including there. And the CRO had very specific things he wanted, because I initially reported the CRO there. I think it was probably Eric just gradually became more involved. And it was probably, I don't remember when the Utah chapter started, but that was local. That was my first time that I would say that I was actively engaging and not just passively consuming with SES.
I'm assuming somewhere in the 17, 18.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into, speaking of the founding of the Sales Enablement Society, and Jill and her other 99-ish friends, along with Scott, they founded the Sales Enablement Society originally on 3 positions. One, that sales enablement is a strategic approach to eliminating friction across the commercial system processes. 2, that in order to accomplish that, sales enablement to be effective needed to be chartered and run as what they coined business within a business.
Yep.
And then 3, that there needed to be an aspirational state if they that were the we wanted to evolve the profession and they needed to have an aspiration. And the title they came up with was Chief Productivity Officer. What do those 3 positions mean to you personally? And maybe even comment through the lens of being the president of the Revenue Enablement Society today.
The meaning for me runs pretty deep. For the first 2, we can talk about the CPO position. I don't have a strong position on it either way. I can see the benefits. I can see why they took that position. I don't disagree with it, but I've always been one step removed from the CEO. I've been able to get everything I needed done that way. Siobhan Thatcher probably came the closest to anyone I personally know to achieving that when she was at Ring. Let's talk about the first 2. So you mentioned who else was in the room. Even though at that initial stage, it was only sales leaders, because we had to build that core enablement for sales, very specific outcomes that my boss wanted as soon as possible. Fast forward almost a year, And in that time, we'd built onboarding. We had run a bunch of classes because we were hiring like crazy. So there was a class every month. And we had established a global customized a version of a sales methodology I'd learned as Microsoft. And I had used it. It was leadered into it, customized it for Instructure, and had gotten certified to teach it. We've rolled it out. So we've got the core of what he wanted built, right? Pitch certification, all the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was able to look around. And as a sales leader there, I saw firsthand how friction between marketing and sales and professional services, sales and CS, that friction that was degrading, like a better word, that customer experience, or certainly not elevating it to where it could be. I just knew from a practical standpoint, having to put out fires, right? You know what I'm talking about. And at that point, marketing from the very beginning was part of building the ICPs and all of that. And so that for the business methodology that I was teaching all of the salespeople, right? So they already were at that point at the table and they were all in. Great marketing leaders. Michelle Burrows, one of the best marketing leaders I've worked with. Then I went to our COO, and his guy named Sam. And I talked to him about that friction that I had observed with this methodology, briefed him on the methodology, that here were the potential benefits that I saw for our customers by having his customer success teams and renewals team, et cetera, come through as we did, because we were still rolling sessions with sales. And so I wanted to start sprinkling in some of each parts of those teams each time, so that by the end of the cycle, they would all be enabled with the same methodology. And Bassam bought in to what I thought was going to be a good thing. And so we started doing it. And again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And so without realizing knowing anything about that position, it was just a very practical response to problems that I had dealt with there at that company and seen. So when that position came out and I was able to read, what was the reasoning behind it? What did they do? It was, first of all, it was very validating. That was cool. But second of all, it was so much better articulated than I had thought about it, right? I was reacting to problems and filling gaps, but I didn't have the background then to think about it the way those people did.
Right.
And the other position that meant that so much to me was the business within a business. I wasn't articulate enough to come up with that phrase. I told you about the roots of how we started building enablement from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had taken that view from the beginning. It's me and a bunch of sales leaders reporting to a head of sales. And so we always just looked at what are the outcomes? What do the reps need to hit their numbers? What do the reps need to professionally grow?
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was 100% results focused, because that's how we knew how to think. And I've been doing that for years, focused 100% on results. And so the trainings, and they were means to an end for us. And so as always, we built it, and I built it and viewed it as a business coming out of Palm Beach. They articulated it and explained it and talked about it in ways that, okay, now I understand how it's working. And we understand why something's working, not just that it is.
Mm-hmm.
You have the opportunity to then really amp it up. And so to this day, I'm very grateful for the time, the money, the energy that those folks invested, because I directly benefited from it almost right away.
You were doing exactly what they put words to.
Close, not exactly, but close.
Well, it put a headline over what you were doing. You weren't.
Yeah.
I was already nailing it. They caught up with me.
Yeah.
Right now, that's not where we're going. And so what I know a good bit about you, that's so much of what you're doing, and you're going into businesses who don't even have a sales enablement team and doing what you've naturally been doing now for well over a decade. You were connecting those kind of dots, having those kind of conversations, a degree or two of separation, if not almost directly to the C-suite, having those strategic conversations that landed in tactics and addressing those gaps. So I love everything you said. Now and to me, that was through the Paul Butterfield revenue flywheel and your history. Now let's shift and put the president of the RES hat on. What does that look like through the lens of the current day? What would you say the current day positions are, or primary initiatives and what's the delta between everything you just described and what's hot and what's focused and what the members are asking for, a combination of those things in the present.
So everything we've talked about so far, to be clear, that's my personal experience. I didn't even go to my first SES conference till 2019, but have some great stories to tell from that. It was an amazing conference. San Antonio. Yeah, which was a great look. The Riverwalk there. I can't think of a better place to have a conference. It was really cool.
So fun.
It was fun. I'd done a sales kickoff there a few years before, so I was excited to go back. Probably the most obvious thing to most of your listeners is the name change that you referenced. A little history on that. In December of last year, 2022, I asked the board. I had been president for, 4 or 5 months by then. I asked the board to come to Salt Lake just because I had really good meeting space available at Instructure we could use. And we did a strategic offsite. Okay. And we started with a SWOT analysis. And we were brutally honest with ourselves, right? What is the state of SES? And this is not a criticism of anybody. This is us ourselves figuring out, okay, what's broken? What do we need to focus on?
And this is one of the things 22.
This is December of 22.
Okay.
One of the things that in those discussions that we hit on is the fact that most of us in the room, and at the time that was Juliana Stancampiano, Siobhan Thatcher, Bill Ball, Peter Ostrow, Craig. Kelly was actually remoting in from Australia. She didn't fly in for this. But in our collective experience, in our careers, we were all doing enablement for far more than just the sales team. We all had come around in our own ways to the fact that that position was very correct. We need to be eliminating friction across the commercial teams, I think is how it was worded in the original position. But I look at it as just across the go-to-market motion, right? Across the customer journey and the customer experience. That's really what matters. And so that led us to a discussion about, has the industry, our profession, outgrown our name? And we didn't make any decisions that day, but it became one of our strategic initiatives for the year to look into it, investigate it, and continue the conversation. And that's what we did. And ultimately, everything we found, or most of what we found, validated the fact that, this is how people are talking about enablement finally. Think about last year, the chatter on LinkedIn and social, right? People were starting to really talk about it broadly for the first time. And for a few reasons, we decided that we were maybe almost playing catch up, to be honest. Again, and so that's when we started to put together the positions that we announced from the stage, and we released them in the press release. We released them on LinkedIn. I think we've got 26,000 followers on our LinkedIn page, and that's what led us there.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you actually had each member of the board came up and gave their personal kind of testimony from, this is why I voted for.
Yes, that was as we were trying to decide what to do, how to do it. I told them, I said, that is not my story to tell, right? Because the typical thing originally was that the president closes out the conference type of thing. And I said, not this. It just doesn't make sense. This was a collective decision. It was based on 9 people's life professional experience and learning. So that's how that session evolved. We started to figure out, how do we, without taking up a lot of time, without dragging the big announcement down, share those backgrounds and the whys. It seemed to go pretty well. The room erupted. We weren't sure. We assumed people would like it, but the room went nuts. You were there. It was actually pretty cool. Yeah.
Paul, the move to Revenue Enablement Society, you mentioned that we were maybe falling behind. I assume you mean through the lens of sales ops. You rarely hear that now. You hear rev ops, right?
Yeah. CRO was an well-established position before 2022, December. Yeah. The other part of our thinking was that in our personal career experience in building and watching other people, that was where the profession had been going for a little while. And that was actually what was predicted, if you think about it, in 2016 by reducing commercial friction. It probably took longer than people would have hoped at that time. But you think about that trend towards revenue enablement that it started in the last few years and picked up steam. it's at least my interpretation of that founding position is that it is you're getting outside of just the sales silo and you're breaking down walls and you're helping eliminate, or you can't eliminate, but reduce the friction across commercial teams. That had been happening. That was coming about somewhat naturally. And we were acknowledging that. That's the other piece I'd add to that, that we were already there. Yeah.
How about this as a very clear indication to our audience? If I am in a sales enablement role, I'm focused on X. As I shift into the title of revenue enablement, and the society does as well, I'm doing all of X, and I'm adding additional things, whether it's who I support, the processes I'm focused on, how I go about my business. What is the shift in that? What did I pick up in my roles and responsibilities?
Who else is impacting your customer journey from top of the funnel for renewal, if you're in SaaS renewal? And it's then building an enablement umbrella and strategy first, always first strategy. And that's where your expansion comes in. I have noticed that a lot of people are doing that, but still have the title of sales enablement. And that's a lot of times a function of how their HR does the job architecture and things like that. Okay. So I don't always assume that title means you're only doing sales, but we're seeing more and more people having revenue or even GTM in their titles. And I always assume when I see that they are doing what you just described.
So column A, I'm only enabling sales. In revenue, it's all of the above. What additional roles am I enabling?
You mentioned CS. You mentioned CS. So definitely that. Renewals teams, which may or may not be part of CS. Some companies I've worked with, a number of them actually had a separate renewals team, and some of those reported into sales. Sometimes they reported into customer success. It's a mix. One I don't think you mentioned is RevOps. And enablement and RevOps have very different, equally important roles, but we've also been able to assist in onboarding new RevOps folks, in helping them get plugged in different ways. Even back my very first gig, we talked about it, and in Contact, after we had our onboarding going for a while, marketing leaders were like, hey, can I send my people? The same thing happened at Vonage. And our answer was always yes, but here was the ask. They have to be in class and they have to fully participate, do the work, just like if they were in the sales org and it was like part of their job. We don't want them popping in and out or stuff like that. Got it. Which they agreed to. So yeah, I think that's the only other one though that you didn't mention, Eric, would be RevOps. There is a role. Teaching coaching frameworks. RevOps leaders need effective coaching frameworks, just like every other Rev leader. Onboarding, and we've been able to provide that in some cases. Now, RevOps gets very specialized very quickly. And so typically we will work with them to build the onboarding path, but then they take over the ongoing everboarding, some people call it, professional development of their teams. When you get into revenue leadership enablement, you're able to help develop RevOps, develop their leadership team. You're able to help marketing develop their leadership team, CS and all the others.
Interesting. For me, I think of it as, and I've thought about it this way my entire career, enabling the entire, my phrase, customer-facing frontline. What I'm hearing from you is RevOps may or may not be customer-facing, right? RevOps might even be, and I buy into that, definitely you need to be in sync strategically with RevOps. So maybe it isn't just the customer-facing frontline, it's other internal roles as well.
That's why I use customer journey enablement. Who impacts the customer journey? RevOps may never talk to a customer, but the work they do and the tools they're providing for the reps, the analysis they're providing for leadership and for marketing absolutely impacts the customer journey.
Interesting.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I thought my worldview of enablement was big. You're going internal, as you're enabling the whole shooting match.
Yeah. They may be the last group that you bring into the fold if you're developing this.
Sure.
Not that they're not important, but the people that do directly work with customers and the assets that product marketing and marketing are creating need to be aligned with how you're teaching your sellers to sell differently. You got to start there. And I have found that RevOps leaders welcome the help. When you think about enablement, and one of those ways that I think about it at a high level is our role is to identify with all revenue leaders, what are the few things that only they can do to develop and coach their employees? And everything else in that employee's development, enablement should take off that plate. Because every leader in a revenue org has very limited time for coaching and development of their people. So let's let them focus and maximize that time they have, and then we are supporting them in the others.
It sounds like something that someone called a chief productivity officer would say, Paul.
Nice. Position 3. Yes.
Yeah. It still lives.
Maybe I do have a stronger opinion about it than I thought. I don't know.
We're storming the C-suite, Paul. Let's move forward a little bit into the present. What attribute or aspect of the enablement function are you, Paul, most passionate about right now? Or maybe simply flat out curious?
Start with passion. My passion continues to this day with helping companies understand two things. One, somewhere in the last several years, I started referring to what we do as customer journey enablement. Not saying that should be what we call our profession, but for my version, my vision of how enablement needed to be created across the commercial teams, that was something that executives and other people I talked to, they could get their heads around that, right? There is so much opportunity in the enablement world to take the companies that we work with to another level. And I know that gets used a lot, but here's what I mean by that. How much outreach do you get? How much outreach on LinkedIn and email does everybody listening right now get? And how much of it is horrible and cringeworthy? I'd say for me, easily 90%, right? And so that tells me that the bar is still low. That tells me that the companies that are lucky enough to have enablement and have the foresight to have enablement have the opportunity to rise above that by doing full customer journey enablement, full commercial enablement. Now, what am I curious about? Probably what everybody else listening right now is curious about: AI. Yeah. And I've found ways that I'm using it that are changing my workflow and things like that. But I've recently attended, I think 2 weeks ago, was a webinar done and that showed some upcoming capabilities that one of the enablement platforms are launching with AI. I was blown away. And we were under NDA, so it's coming. Trust me, and you'll probably know when you hear about it what I'm talking about. But I was like, wow, it's coming next year early. I just spent the last 2 days. I hope it's okay to mention Sales 3.0 and Gerhardt. It's a fantastic AI in sales 2-day virtual conference. Again, came away with my eyes opened. I mean, I thought I was on top of AI. No, there's just so much happening. And I learned so much that I'm excited to start implementing in my personal selling and in my client work going down the road. It's going to be really cool next year. So I am wildly curious about that and trying to learn what I can.
You couldn't have better queued up my final question to you. And I'm sure you see it coming. The future. See what I did there? What's next for in this enablement evolution? And maybe share a little bit of a click down into not giving anything away, but what are maybe some of those possibilities that you've heard about? So as a profession, and maybe through the lens specifically of AI and what's possible.
My opinion is, in the profession, I don't know if in 2024, set aside AI, that we will see a massive evolution. And I say that because there is still so much work to do with becoming a business within a business. Vast majority of enablement teams aren't doing that. Peter Ostrow and I were talking just earlier this week, and his observation, and he has a pretty good viewing perch, is that the sales and the revenue leaders he talks to still look at enablement as, in general, as nice people, good trainers, but they would not necessarily bring them into a meeting with the CEO or the CFO, right?
They haven't established the gravitas we were talking about earlier.
And they probably don't know how to talk C-level, right? Because they really don't care. If you think your boss doesn't care about butts and seats and smiley sheets, a lot of progress has been made. The conversations are exciting to see, the public conversations about becoming a business, operating as a business within a business. The conversations about we're not just enabling sales and why is that critical? Again, and I'm not the only one, right? I know others that have been operating that way for a long time, but again, stumbled on it. Now we know, now we have science behind it. Now we have a lot of understanding. So my thing is, I think we'll just get better and better at that, Eric, and hopefully see wider and wider adoption within our practice. Now, AI is here, and it's going to continue to impact what we do and how we do it. I don't know to what degree, but I recently heard, I thought a really useful analogy of current state of AI, and it was this. Look at what we have today as a highly educated college intern, very smart, very educated, but they don't have the context of career and life experience yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the current state, which is why you have the mistakes that get made in AI. You have those things. That's going to get better. But I thought that was a really useful analogy. And if you had that person working for you, which things that you do could you hand off to them and trust that they could execute well?
Right.
And of course, you would still inspect that person's work, right? In the future, and even next year, I don't know that we're going to get past that, like completely, but there are going to become more and more things, tasks that as enablement, we will be able to automate, that we will be able to trust AI to do and to get better and better at doing it, which means less and less inspection. Now, what does that free up? That frees up a lot of our time if we're doing it strategically and smart. One of the sessions I heard in the conference the last 2 days was on having a blueprint for AI. Do not rush out and adopt it until you have a blueprint of why you want it, what your desired outcomes are, et cetera. Now we've got time freed up, because I've never talked to an enablement leader who was overfunded and had more headcount than they know what to do with. Never, ever, probably never will. So now now we have more ability to focus on the 50,000 foot view, to focus on strategically, how can we assist the companies that we work for and with in elevating. When I look at enablement, Eric, at the highest level, I see it as enabling the go-to-market teams, commercial teams, to elevate, to differentiate by exceptional customer experience.
Right.
Not price, please, not price,
Mm-hmm.
and not features, gag. And to do that, that is the highest level of the calling in our profession, in my experience. And that's my North Star. You and I have talked about North Stars. I would say that's probably mine right there. That's what I'm looking for next year.
I like it. And to pile on it back to our conversations, that experience infers that you're landing them in the desired business outcome that gives the impact that keeps you around, that helps your business not only land, but expand and get that revenue wheel flying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, of course. But for some clients, honestly, Eric, what makes most sense for them is for me to do a full revenue org analysis and SWOT analysis. Here's what I found. Here's the top 3 areas you need to focus on. Here's why they're broken. And for some people, that just makes sense because that's one of my commitments. I'll always deliver an output that you don't have to keep me around to operate off of. So I'll give you an example. I worked early in the year with a co-founder at a startup, and the co-founder told me, this is great. This output, this is what we need. Thank you. We just can't afford a long-term investment right now.
That's a great through the lens of advising a business. How about we land in to all of the folks that, and again, thank you for your service, Paul, in leading the global now Revenue Enablement Society and taking us through the transition. As we know, the profession has been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. There was a lot of excitement about our profession and a blow up during COVID, and then we fell off, and then we came back, and then we fell off a little bit, and it feels like we're on the rise again. What maybe are the 3 things, speaking of value and desired business outcomes, that individual practitioners or leaders in sales enablement might want to focus on as we head into the new year to be relevant and fit into that revenue engine, I'll call it, model that you're speaking of?
At our chapter meeting here in Utah yesterday, our speaker was Eddie Morris, a local member. who talked to us about the need to have a challenger mindset. Challenger as in the challenger sale. Mindset in enablement. And I would absolutely pass that same advice along. Don't be a waiter. You ask a waiter for things and they bring them to you. And there's a fine line between doing that, being reactive and responsive, but also bringing value to the relationship. That's that whole challenger mindset. If you haven't read Challenger Sale, go read Challenger Sale and think about how you would then apply that mindset to the internal work. Make no mistake, you are in sales.
Right.
You are selling sales leaders and marketing leaders, et cetera, or you should be, on how how things should be improving and that sort of thing. Number two, we tell sales reps this all the time, but in my experience and observations, we don't practice it very well as a whole. And that is, understand your ICPs. I attribute whatever success I've had enablement to the fact that I was in the trenches selling and leading salespeople for a very long time. But you don't have to have that background. I have worked with exceptional enablement folks that did not come from sales, but what made them exceptional is they learned about their ICPs. They invested the time, the energy, they found ways to understand or develop the business acumen to understand that world of the salespeople and the sales leader.
They got in the
it's
trenches,
not as easy.
Maybe you could say.
They have found ways to effectively do that. That would be my advice. If you haven't been in sales, you need to go. You tell the sales reps this all the time. I bet anything, right? Understand your ICP, develop the business acumen to have value-added conversations with them right out of the gate. Again, read Challenger about that. But are we doing it internally? Have we made that investment? Can we talk to our internal ICPs like we tell salespeople to talk to theirs?
So get to know your ICP, get in the trenches with your sales, build that empathy for your ideal customer profile.
I would even say business acumen. Empathy will come with that, but you've got to have the business acumen or you won't have any credibility. The third thing, and this may be controversial, but I think you like controversy. I know you do.
I love it. Challenge me.
Please stop talking about the ROI of enablement. It's that specific term. I've been telling my salespeople for years not to use that term with sellers or buyers. Here's why. Those that understand what a real ROI is will immediately look at you as a lightweight. You will never get all the information from a buyer to truly do a real ROI. They're never going to give you CAC. They're never going to give you a lot of those metrics. Why should they? What you can do, though, is identify the gap between current state and future state and what the financial impact of this, and with them, develop a compelling business case that will result in positive outcomes, positive financial impact that they agree with you will happen. That's what you need to sell, right? But if you get to a CFO in your process and you start showing them the ROI from your ROI calculator, they're probably going to laugh at you. Now, fast forward, in our enablement world, it's the same thing. I understand what people mean when they say that. But again, some people want to argue with me. We'll get some good comments going here. And I've been measuring enablement outcomes and inputs and reporting it to the EC, Executive Committee, for over a decade, right? You do not have the ability to do a true ROI. There are too many variables. What you can and what you must do is create reasonable correlation to what your team is doing, leading and lagging indicators, reasonable correlation back to results that the revenue organization is having. And you need to do that over time. That will build you credibility. So I guess all I'm saying, Eric, is words matter, and ROI, I just feel very strongly, is not the right word to use to communicate what it is that you're actually doing and that we all need to be doing. Bring the comments, folks.
Yeah, bring them on in. Again, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for your service, and congrats on the transition into the Revenue Enablement Society .global, RE-Society.global, folks. It is, in fact, live. Maybe you heard it here first. Maybe it's old news. Either way, it is huge. Go take on that world and keep in touch, would you? Come back.
All right, Eric. I will. We got to do another concert in 2024.
Let's
So.
do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
All right, man.
Thanks, Paul.
All
Thanks for joining us. To become an insider and amplify your journey, please make sure you've subscribed to our show. Thanks for joining us. To become an insider and amplify your journey, please make sure you've subscribed to our show.
You can do so at orchestratesales.com/podcast.